escaping. She was not expecting them to have use so soon. She actually dropped most of the supplies on the run, but she picked them up on the way back here. Luluo was lugging a large sack of carbamide, something that Li Chengyin was clueless about. He properly thanked her for saving him from the brink of total deprivation. She might just be his fated lucky star. However, the effect of the fertilizer was short-lived. His hand started shriveling up again like an old man's. The problem hasn't been solved yet. They must quickly find the source before it's too late. Based on Li Chengyin's decrepit trembling, it looks like they don't have much time left. After some time, they finally reached the vicinity of the mysterious plant. The two decided to scout the situation behind some foliage first, just to be safe. This little purple plant that's only a few centimeters long was actually capable of absorbing Li Chengyin's essence at such a drastic rate. Luluo had never even seen something like this plant in her university. The scary explanation would be that plants can also transform into darksiders. That theory has a high possibility of being true. But Li Chengyin was supposed to be a whole piece of land, so how can a single stalk thinner than an arm can suck him dry? Maybe it's time to see just how tough it is and what sort of secrets it is hiding. Li Chengyin manipulated the soil around the plant, twisting the landmass around its base. The purple plant let out a toot sound once it noticed that something was up with the ground. Alerted to what was happening, the purple plant immediately uprooted itself, revealing dozens of gruesome spheres riddling its massive and complex root system. Each sphere looked more disgusting than the last, especially in the center area. He assessed that those were probably giant tumors growing along the roots. Moreover, the roots themselves are tough. Even the power of the land was unable to crush them. Luluo identified those things as rhizobium attached to the roots of a leguminous plant. Rhizobium helps the leguminous plant to absorb nitrogen from the atmosphere. It basically has a mutualistic relationship with the plant. That means that even if this thing stopped absorbing nutrients from his body, it would already be self-sufficient. The power of the land is useless against the toughness of the roots. He could not think of anything else in his arsenal that would help. Now that the plant has noticed their presence, all they can do is dodge and weave against those vicious root attacks. Upon revealing more of its root system up to the surface, a few corpses surfaced along with it. It was the tree and iron bar darksiders that Li Chengyi buried earlier. It looked like they were about to become sustenance for the mysterious plant. But that wasn't the case. According to Li Chengyi, there was an aura coming out of the darksiders that normal people couldn't see. That aura flowing out of the corpses steadily traveled toward the plant itself. After feasting on that mysterious power, the signature looks of a darksider fully bloomed where the flower's pistil was supposed to be. Along with its sickeningly oversized rhizobium, the thing has turned into a real transformed monster, a full-on darksider. It eked out another one of those toot sounds before priming one of its roots to attack. The root was sharpened at its tip and was traveling at incredible speeds. Its destination was Luluo's heart. Our soil boy was not going to let that happen, though. He jumped right in front of her, shielding her body with his. It pierced through his stony body, cracking his chest into tiny pieces. It might look bad, but at least the girl was safe. That strong penetrating power is even stronger than those two human darksiders that he buried earlier. Luluo saw how such a deadly natural weapon made a hole in his body and felt helpless. The plant intends to follow the piercing attack with a bludgeoning one using the dense lumps. He screamed at her to escape while she had the chance to do so. When the ball sack finally descended from the heavens, Li Chengyi's quickly crumbled, breaking under the blunt force. Again, it might look bad, but these kinds of external injuries won't kill him. But with how badly outmatched he was, that won't last too long. The only thing that he could do was at least buy the lady some time to make a run for it. He yelled at her for the second time, insisting that this was his own personal matter. If he involves Luluo in this insanity, how can he even talk about protecting her and living together? She felt his genuine sentiments down to her core, but she was still just standing there. He shouted one last time that she should not look down on the attacks of a darksider. His shouts fell on seemingly deaf ears. 4 root attacks were already heading for the motionless young lady. She responded by pulling out vials of green liquid from her agricultural bag and dousing the plant roots with it. The plant monster was surprised and felt the pain creeping up from the doused roots. It unleashed a shrill scream as the roots that were supposed to kill the young lady quickly dried and disintegrated. Although Luluo doesn't know much about darksiders, she knows plants. This one they're facing seems to have a very powerful absorption ability. That's why she decided to bust out a dose of industrial-grade herbicide for the enemy to suck on. This is an original solution that hasn't been diluted, so it's one of the strongest out there. Under the light of the perpetual eclipse, the plant's roots started withering at a rapid rate until everything crumbled and shattered into dust. The diluted herbicide that it absorbed from the roots quickly traveled throughout its whole system, dissipating its once powerful weapons. What was left after that was a single stalk of flower diving right down to the ground. Just a few moments ago, this thing was unleashing some menacing toot sounds, and now it's shivering pathetically. The only explanation was that it had somehow lost its will to fight after one gigantic setback. Lulo has also calmed down now that Toot Toot has surrendered. Yes, she already gave the flower a name. Toot Toot lifted its head and carefully lifted its own fruit as some sort of peace offering. Li Chengxie remained vigilant. This thing in front of them was still a darksider. Who knows what goes on inside the minds of such creatures? The young lady wasn't 100% sure if it was safe. She might not know about darksiders, but she always likes hanging out with plants. Compared to the transformed humans, Toot Toot's thoughts were easier to understand. The innocent smile on the flower's face was quite a giveaway that didn't mean any harm. To show its surrender even clearer, Toot Toot decided to lower itself into the ground, prostrating an apology for what it did earlier. It seems like Luluo has a good grasp of the situation. After receiving a threat to its life, Toot Toot's manners have become a lot more human-like. Upon closer look at the offerings, Luluo determined that they were not fruits. They are stem tubers. This might mean that Toot Toot transformed into a monster from a potato. While Li Chengyin recovered rapidly, she was busy peeling the offerings, looking for some that weren't affected by the herbicide. Spotting one promising piece, she decided to cut just a tiny portion out. She then proceeded to put the tiny piece into her mouth just to try it, much to Li Chengyin's horror. As she gnawed on the tiny portion, he hurriedly ran to her side, trying to make sure that it was not poisonous. It had a familiar taste, and it was edible. It would be better to cook it first. But other than that, it received Luluo's seal of approval. He was still worried about some fringe poison, though. If she feels the first sign of poisoning, he wouldn't hesitate to pour soil into her stomach to suck the poison out. He was so anxious, even though she did not even swallow. She had one more warning for Toot Toot. The plant would be barred from absorbing the nutrients on the ground so viciously. It can only do so if Li Chengyin consents. With how receptive Toot Toot was acting, this could also be considered a successful taming. He has another question for this greedy plant. He wanted to know what it absorbed from the bodies of those human darksiders. It was a dark-colored substance, so we'll be referring to it as dark element. Fortunately, Toot Toot has some talents too. It plucks a little ball's worth of dark elements out of thin air. Li Chengyin was pleased and immediately reached his hand out to inspect the dark element a little closer. The power from the little ball immediately dissolved and traveled into his body like a lightning bolt. He suddenly started hearing some unfamiliar voices talking all around them coming from above. They were talking about how the sunlight seemed to have changed recently and about an intruder coming in. Toot Toot kept on repeating its catchphrase, but Li Chengyin started to understand its speech pattern. Toot Toot was asking him if the dark element was tasty. It sounds like he can now understand the plants that are growing on his body now, his land. Is this the effect of the dark element? The flower explained that it does. The dark element changes darksiders. It makes them stronger. Speaking of stronger, it looks like we'll just have to see now that an uninvited guest has crept into their position. Another darksider with a body that looks like it's made up of wood in its entirety bursts into the scene. Li Chengyin felt it coming from a mile away. He did not even bother turning around. He got eyes throughout the whole land that he occupied. The poor darksider did not even get the chance to show off before getting impaled by multiple earth spears. Luluo did not notice the enemy making her jump from fright. He told her not to worry since the plants already told him about this darksider in advance. After absorbing the dark element, his control and power over the land have increased exponentially. He only had 3 words for the poor darksider who failed the sneak attack. Rest in peace. Manipulating the soil on the monster's feet, Li Chengyin essentially devoured Wood Guy and left no crumbs. From now on, another darksider has become a permanent fertilizer to the land. As he tightened the grip from the underground, a menacing smoke formation started emerging into the air. He manipulated the loose power into his body. This confirms that the dark element is present inside every darksider. Even if they are killed, the dark element does not disappear right away. This means that continuing to absorb dark element mist will make him inevitably stronger. This way, he and Luluo could have a much better chance of survival. She could finally breathe again. She was just concerned about his well-being. Seeing him in a daze, she thought that Toot Toot attacked him somehow. Speaking of Toot Toot, this thing has some opinions regarding Luluo too. People are supposed to be afraid of darksiders, but she's not. Since the flower was curious about how she could accept the current situation so easily, she tried to explain. It's just because she grew up playing in the soil. She's practically familiar with everything that's on a farm. Toot Toot proposed the idea of sharing dark elements with Li Chengyin so they could coexist. The little flower is already on par with humans in the intelligence department. Maybe it's because it already absorbed plenty of juice from darksiders. Toot Toot doesn't like being touched, though. Chengyin approved the coexistence plan since he also has more control over the nutrients on his ground now. But before that, he needed to know something first. He asked Toot Toot where the tiny ball of dark element came